This is, I guess, the beginning of the live broadcast, and this is Patty Lager from Patty Lager ND, and this is my special guest, David Fastiggi. Normally I do my live Q&As on my laptop or computer, but today I'm doing it on my cell phone because I want to share my screen with David, and we are going to have a wonderful, deep discussion that is going to center around detoxification, but not just on the physical level, really what's required to help us heal at a deeper level. And this is paramount not only to our own physical health, emotional health, and spiritual health, but also the health of all life in the universe, of all life on this planet. So I just want to take a moment to let David share a little bit about himself, and then we'll just kind of get the ball going from there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well.
Good. Well, as you know, my name is David Fastiggi, and I've been in the field of the healing sciences and arts for about 45 years. And it's really quite different now than it was then. Back in the early 1970s, you just had family-owned health food stores, one which was every other city. And but in the 1980s, things really picked up momentum, which is good. My basic background's in clinical nutrition from the New York Institute of Dietetics, where it's basically just a science school. I studied about 3,000 hours of the sciences and applied nutrition. But my real, I think, deeper and richer experiences when I went into the mountains in the 70s, periodically for 3 years in the Jemez, Manzanos, and the Sandia Mountains in New Mexico. And there I would fast anywhere from 3 to almost a month at a time. And this was really very deeply transformational for me, not only biologically, but on a spiritual level as well. This is really my exodus from the world, in a manner of speaking. But it also was a portal and a gateway into seeing another life that existed, another reality, and that was one of our true identity, the integration of self, both emotionally and biologically. Well, thereafter, I went into medical practice with a physician for about 10 years. And then for about 20 years, I really endeavored to learn an ancient language, which is nearly extinct in Aramaic, because I wanted to understand ancient scrolls, particularly the teachings of Jesus. In other words, what did he really say? Transcendent of religion, transcendent of dogma and belief systems. I want to understand what was the real message. In the last several years, I would say my focus has been to understand the effects of trauma, child abuse, the absence of love, abandonment in our growth period from 0 up until 12 years of age, and also the effect, the devastating impact of trauma as an adult and how that affects our biological systems and how it simply becomes a saboteur of life and what to do about it. So my focus now really is to share or to discuss a paradigm of the undivided self and how to get there. How do we navigate forward considering the debris field of the past? Right.
And that trauma and, oh, sorry, I knew that was going to happen. The trauma of my puppy looking out the window. Sorry about that. That is, it's something all of us carry, and it's something we all have to heal. And if we don't heal it, all we do is we carry it forward. And I think that's been your kind of consistent message, one of your very consistent messages since I've known you, David, is to heal that foundation trauma. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, it really is, because it's so hidden and it's mostly unconscious. Therefore, it's what we don't know, and what we don't know, we need to know, because what we don't know actually has a voice. It's a program running in our unconscious self. It influences our decision makings. It influences people you're attracted to or relationships we get into. It affects our sense of confidence, either to accept or to walk away from a job opportunity. And this unconscious program also has a very powerful dialogue, which all through adult life gets triggered.
Right.
And there are many triggers which amplify this trauma program inside of ourselves. And it goes on from one generation to the next as well. And unless we address it, unless we stop fearing what's deep down inside of us, and we learn to embrace what's deep down inside of us, unless we learn to embrace the darkness in the depth of our being, it can't be healed. So, my focus has really been, in current time, is to really understand how do we end the cycle of cruelty in the world. And it's more than, while vitally important, public action, demonstrations of non-cruelty, such as having a voice for the voiceless, the animals.
Right.
But the problem is not just the slaughterhouses or the cruelty to animals. The problem is humans and human behavior.
Yeah.
So we have to address human behavior. Why do we do the things we do? How have we allowed, after tens of thousands of years, how have we allowed this to go on? What is it about our species that creates justifications for cruelty from one generation to the next? And these issues have to be answered, because the answer to that is the answer to our own personal sense of self-contempt, our own sense of worthlessness, or semi-conscious self-hate, which then simply is projected outwardly.
Yeah, it is. It's quite interesting that projection is quite common in people that have been traumatized. And it often is something that's hidden from even themselves. And there is that aspect of self-loathing that people often can't see. But, I think there is a foundational element there that maybe that, this is a whole different topic that we can discuss, but that is the core. That is the trauma that is creating the pain all around us, not just with the animals, not just with society, but, the planet as a whole.
Most certainly true. And, I've traced, I looked back as far as I could reach to about 45,000 years ago. And beyond 12,000 years, history gets very sketchy. And we have to go based upon artifacts and archaeological digs and anthropology. And it gets very sketchy. But there is evidence to show that cruelty has gone on for a long time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a time when we were at peace with ourselves. Now, there might have been tribal cultures, but obviously that didn't spread globally, because we look at the reality of the world today and we can see that we are a species at war with itself. And therefore we damage things around us. So this cycle, which keeps repeating, there's a redundancy to history. And this redundancy, we need to spin out of the cycle of cruelty into a new cycle of deep empathy and sympathy. And as I see it, this is seriously deep work. If we talk about deep healing, it's about deep listening to the awakening of the voice of goodness in us, but also the voice of the saboteurs in us as well. We have to sort it out. And the voice of goodness are, some people say your higher self or divine mind, whatever it is. That voice needs to answer the voice of the wombs of history. The voice of the higher self must speak to the sabotaging voices of where we are broken inside and fractured. Mm-hmm. And all too often, we just see, our society globally in many ways is a It's a manifestation. It's a mirror of our own fractured self.
There's a lot to be said for the many sayings where, we control our own reality, and in a way we do, because we are responsible for everything that has already been manifested around us. And many of us don't want to take responsibility for that. But, where I'm coming from with regards to health and helping people lift themselves out of suffering, and I apologize if you hear my dog in the background.
It's not much.
But,
Yes.
okay, good. He's pretty persistent. But, coming from a standpoint of health, I work with many clients, some of them bedridden, some of them, they can't, leave the bed that they're lying in 24/7. Some of them are in so much pain, and they're trying to lift themselves out of this, and sometimes it's within the pain that they gain clarity and they transcend it. So I'm trying to just make that connection between, the suffering people experience on a physical level, and how that, because some people may even tell themselves, well, I'm so sick, I can't deal with the trauma of the world at this point, if that makes sense.
Understandably so.
And so, but it's all connected, really. And it's kind of like each of us as individuals, as we go into the pain, we come out at a higher level, at a level that can see, at a level that's more empathic. Because it's only when you've experienced, true hardship, that you know what someone else is going through when they're in that same place. And that's the empathy and sympathy and the connection we need to make to help us get out of this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Our pain can be, it can be a base, and it can be the cradle of distilling great wisdom. And navigating through that pain, of course, we have to be very honest to distill the lessons that are being taught to us, as opposed to burying the pain, suffocating it, and repressing it. And this is the problem with trauma. When we're deeply wounded, when we're deeply hurt, when we've had experiences of abandonment, rejection, or something which makes us second guess our worth. These are moments that we have to really listen very, very clearly to what lesson is being taught to us. And in doing that, I think we can make great accomplishments, as you said, because, the interesting thing is that, when you talk to a few hundred people, or, over the course of your life, it adds up to a couple of thousand people, you find out that we're all very similar, actually.
Yeah.
There's no great mystery here. We all experience heartbreak. We experience loneliness. We get frustrated. We've all have been let down. We've disappointed ourselves. Other people have disappointed us, and we've been left shaking like a reed in the wind. Most of us have experienced impact where, a notification in one day suddenly changes everything about your life, whether it's the death of a parent, the loss of a child, the loss of someone you loved or you thought loved you. It can be a wide range of things. All of a sudden, we are shaken.
Yeah.
Suddenly, we realize that what we thought was real wasn't as real as we thought. And this is very disturbing to us, because innately we want to be vulnerable. Innately we want to give of ourselves. Innately we want to feel safe. I mean, one of our primal directives is to feel safe. As soon as we come out of the womb, inherently, instinctively, on a primal level, we want to cuddle with our mother. We want to be safe. And when we experience that we're not safe, it's very disturbing as an adult. Because not being safe as an adult potentially can remind us if we were not safe as a child at any given moment.
Yes, how vulnerable we are.
That's right. And yet, being vulnerable is part of the beauty of life, because how can we love if we're not vulnerable?
Yeah.
This is the problem. We want that. Exactly. So what
Yeah.
happens is that we end up retreating and distrusting, and we don't want to open anymore. We end up forfeiting potential.
Mhm.
So this is almost like a paradox. We want to love and be loved, but we've been hurt. So we shut down, but in the shutting down, we also exit out of potential. And this is why I think it's so vital that we do heal this deeply.
Right.
So,
And I think that there are connections with that lack of being able to trust, to love, that can be expressed on a physical level. I think that sometimes we get the opportunities to address these types of love, maybe at a spiritual and then an emotional level. But if you keep blocking it out, if you keep just shunting it all away, there's going to be a lack somewhere physically that's going to be
mhm,
expressed physically.
mhm,
I think in Chinese medicine, they talk about the energy as being too yin or too yang. And this disease comes forth, this pathology comes forth from that deficiency. And, I find it so interesting, the connections. I know, like with me personally, I went through a major hardship, heartbreak, loss, um, and a terrible, what felt like an attack. And I felt it all in my liver, all of it, 100%. And it came forth as anger, as um, intense, sadness, and that I could feel it physically in that location. And I just wonder, how much, when I'm working with a client, how much of their own struggle, how much of their own physical pain could be dealt with at another level. And if we can break through that level, can we find true healing?
well, that's very interesting. Yeah. There's no doubt there's a profound correlation between our emotions and our biology. Very deep. In other words, we know now that a child that's been abused, emotionally or physically, it doesn't matter. The key thing is that the child didn't adapt. If that energy was not discharged, if there was not the proper finishing of the cycle, which it's unusual for it to be because the child simply doesn't have the cognitive ability to understand what the hell's going on. So the impact is made. The footprint of trauma is there. And so now we're knowing that because of the change in the neural connections of the brain, the hyperdrive of inflammatory hormones as a child, now we're finding 25 years later that this increases 3 times the potential for autoimmune disease and a greater rate of a variety of different types of depressive
Mm-hmm.
episodes, panic attacks, anxiety attacks, paralysis. A number of things can take place. And, you have elevated epinephrine and cortisol for 20 or 30 years, it's going to cause a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, cortisol has a whole list of negative attributes on the body.
Yeah. And so, the question that I've so often heard is, well, can't I just detoxify all this pain away? You know,
See, that's where the interesting thing is, and I'm realizing my room is getting really dark here, so I'm going to have to get a little bit lighter. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, so many of us want to be in control of what we can do physically to detoxify. And as you and I on a one-on-one, you and I have had our chats together, we talk about the levels at which people will go through to detoxify. For instance, these extended fasts on fruit, on water, which there are health benefits to all of this, I think.
right.
I'm going to go outside with my doggies. But I think that if they're not addressing that emotional trauma, as you've mentioned, that there's not going to be true healing. And it's just going to keep coming back. So these symptoms are going to keep coming back, and that's what's going to also make it harder for them to get to the point of letting go of addictions, letting go of anything that's keeping them stuck. You know, I have a lot of clients that just say that they can't give up certain things, and in them not being able to give it up, that's kind of the point of healing right then and there that we need to be focusing on.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I am definitely in favor of deep detox, cleansing. I mean, my entire journey started off with Arnold Ehret, 45 years ago. The mucus diet healing system and deep detox and cleansing, and it really transformed my life because before that I was a frightful little boy. I was an introvert. I talked to nobody. As a matter of fact, to tell you the truth, I didn't read my first book cover to cover until I was 18.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah, I couldn't read. I was in
Aww.
these special reading classes for years, tutored during the summer. I just kept failing because I couldn't get past the first 3 pages. It just was all confusing to me. And I was abused by the older kids, spit on, and one time they made me lie down in the bus so they could walk over me as a floor mat because I was considered lesser than them. And I recovered a tremendous amount of my self-esteem through cleansing, through diet, through purification. It definitely, with the deeper detox, I'm talking about when you really get into the discharge, there is a certain cycling out of the retained trauma. But what I found over the course of the next 20 or 30 years, there are residuals of hidden trauma which still remain, deeply embedded in the nervous system, deeply in the unconscious self, a depth to which diet cannot reach. So I'm really deeply in favor of, yes, diet, detox, green foods, and having the awareness of what our emotions are saying to us. Where have we been with our emotional life? And how can we find markers of trauma and be able to understand what these markers are saying to us about who we are? Not consciously who we are. I mean, we all have an image of ourselves, don't we? Right? We think we're this, we think we're that, but what do our markers in terms of our behavior in interpersonal relationships, what do they reflect back to us about our inadequacies, which have come from fractures in childhood growth?
You know, you talk about the discharge that you experienced, and then after that you said that there are deeper hidden, like you said, markers that can come forth when we're least expecting it. Are these the kind of the emotions that people experience when they are doing the deeper detox? Like, you know, there's talk of emotional detox when these emotions, they get freed up because of a physical release.
Right. I think to a certain degree, yes, because the same as when a person goes into any type of somatic therapy, whether it's hello work, Rolfing, chiropractic, massage, the same is biologically when we're discharging, it affects our neuromuscular system. Even moving the lymph system will carry stagnant energy with it and help to discharge it. So yes, there is remedial benefits to different physical means to discharge this trauma energy. But I always put a word of caution because I've seen with so many people that have done 50, 60, 70, 80-day grapefruit fasts or grape juice fasts, year after year after year, extensive detox. But knowing these people more deeply, I find that there's personality disorders, panic attacks. Some are bipolar. Some experience intermittent depression. Some to the clinical level, and they've done all this detoxification. So standing back, wisdom would say We are made up of cellular components. We are physical beings from which our cells are necessarily dependent upon foods. So our body is, in many ways, what we eat. But we are also what we believe and what we do and what we've experienced in life emotionally. So there is the emotional, spiritual self, and there's the biological self. And no matter how much you detox, no matter how much you fast or how many, pounds of grapes you eat, if you are not loved in life, there's going to be a deficiency.
Yeah.
And that deficiency, in all likelihood, will not be made up by grapes, figs, or any other food. It's innate in us as social beings, Homo sapiens. We need friends. We need compassion. We need understanding. And we need to give and to be loved. This is my reflection.
It's such a foundational need. We talk about the biological needs as far as, and so many people are so focused on, getting the correct nutrient ratio. And, this is why I kind of like the plant-based, raw, vegan kind of lifestyle, because you're getting all of your nutrients in a whole form that's it's not cooked, it's not denatured, it's just
right
in its pure form. But that doesn't even touch upon those needs that reach to a deeper level, as you mentioned, the love, the feeling as if you are safe with someone else. You're connected to someone else and you can open yourself up to that person. And that, I think, is a level that many people don't even realize needs to be healed.
Yeah, so true. I've come to the conclusion, and reflecting upon my own life, is one of the greatest healing modalities is having somebody simply to listen.
Yeah.
And sometimes you talk to people, you can tell that they're not listening. They're there, but they're not there. They're listening, but they're not hearing you.
And it's so pervasive these days. I mean, how many of my students, I wonder, I'll be talking to them and I'll just ask a question, and it really kind of, for them to really take it in and realize that they're an active participant in this thing that we call communication. It's give and take. And
exactly.
It's really hard for a lot of them. And I think, I'm not picking on the millennials or the younger generations, but I think they do have a little bit of more of a hardship because they're so pulled into technology and other things where it's easy for them not to make that connection. And I'm hoping that, there can be a breakthrough to everybody, because that's not just millennials. I mean, it's people my age, people older, that are all kind of addicted to their phones and all addicted to these ways to not have to connect.
Yeah. It's true. One of the listeners just typed in the text box fear, and I agree with that. You're unfriended.
So good. No, I dropped my phone.
No, I see.
I'm sitting outside with the dogs so that they don't bark, and there's a storm coming, and it's really kind of interesting outside.
Well, I hope it doesn't rain like right away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand, and I think there's somehow through cyberspace and social media, there's been a whole adaptation. There's been an adjustment to hit and run, keyboard warriors. This is not I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm just saying that we need to have meaningful conversation. We need to have meaningful dialogue. We need to learn how to talk to each other. And it's okay if we disagree. Isn't that how we learn?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so many people are afraid of having anybody disagree with them, and they're so easy to unfriend or block, and just kind of like, oh, that person is obviously not on my side, so they need to be discarded. It's kind of unfortunate.
It really is. And yeah, Garrett is writing that, I think he's wishing there was more people on this broadcast because he likes
Oh,
the
now
theme.
I'm now seeing that there are posts there. Okay. Hi, Garrett. How are you? Oops, I didn't mean to zoom in myself. Okay.
Well, how'd you do that? That's interesting. I didn't know you could zoom on a cell
I have
phone.
no idea how I did it. I'm just kind of, I'm new to this whole Facebook sharing on the Go Live. Normally, I'm just doing it on my
Yeah.
laptop.
Yeah.
Um,
I've never done it too. So, yeah. But you know what I mean? We just don't dialogue anymore. And I remember the
no,
eye to eye, the face to face. You disagree. You feel a little uncomfortable. But none of us are always right.
no.
And
Well, and
isn't,
if we were, I mean, we wouldn't be on this planet. This is a planet where we come to learn those lessons. And that was one thing I often think about when we have our talks, David, is, these cycles that we hopefully will one day spring out of. Could it be that it's just, there's always going to be this cycle that's going to keep us spinning until we get to that level of personal knowing? I don't know. Is it really kind of a mass movement, or is it an
yeah,
individual?
it's an interesting question, Patty, because I hope it's okay if I call you Patty.
No, of course, that's okay.
Even though I certainly respect the depth of your professional background, I wish I had your education,
I
actually.
have my students call me Patty, so
Oh,
I
okay. All
don't
right.
feel comfortable with any kind of,
Yeah.
professor or anything like that.
Okay. Well, there is a school of thought, and I respect everybody who has opinion because everybody has the right to have an opinion, and every opinion should be expressed respectfully. And
Mm-hmm.
there are those that feel that the shift is coming, the new age is upon us, and in a couple of years, this is all going to be, catapulted. The earth is going to resurrect itself. The earth is going to cleanse itself real soon.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell you quite honestly, I've been hearing this for 40 years.
Yeah, there's always kind
I
of
mean,
these days of reckoning.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I can cite, in each era, back in the 70s when I started, and this was the age of peace and love and flowers and John Lennon and Haight-Ashbury and a whole new culture, which got swept away by hard drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And all those people, many of them went into Wall Street in the 1980s. So the idealism was squandered. Although vegetarianism picked up momentum, there were shows of vegetarianism and natural healing all over the country, which I was part of at that time through the 1980s. The 1990s come and we start, hearing more about enlightenment. And what I am saying is when I have studied history very, very thoroughly,
Mm-hmm.
wishful thinking doesn't make it happen. It takes steps to get there.
And I got cut off for a second. It was starting to rain, and I'm heading back in.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Sorry.
you were telling me about how you had heard all of these. It's kind of like the same kind of warning.
Yes, it's the
And
same. It's kind of redundant. It's going to happen now. We're going to make this shift. We're going to make this change, and the change will take place. But if we're not wise, if we don't proceed with wisdom, if we don't learn the lessons history has taught us, we might find ourselves faked out. In other words, things could get seriously worse before this utopia, is ushered in. And ushered in means it has to be built through personal transformation, through lineage, through children growing up with a different paradigm of education, without the impact and the footprint of deep trauma. They have to
right.
grow up in an environment where we don't have the propaganda promoting adulterated, denatured, fake foods poisoning our bodies. They're going to have to grow up where the environment is not dangerous to them. There's a lot of factors involved in creating a global community of a paradigm that's different than what we exist in today. It can happen, and that's Otherwise, I'd give up. I've been at this for 45 years. I'd throw in the towel if I didn't believe it was a possibility. I do believe it's a possibility, but we have to move away from fairy dust and magic wands and pretending that snap your finger if we all get together and meditate, the ascension and the global awakening is going to happen. Well, look, maybe there will be an awakening. We can wake up, but that doesn't mean you're going to live in a righteous, grounded way all day long. We can wake up. Knowing truth is one thing. Living it is another.
It's the living it part. Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, I think that we're kind of at that point where, there is that aspect of personal responsibility that it is all on our own shoulders, this transformation.
Yeah, I'm just reading some of the comments here. Karen is saying it's going to happen, not anytime soon. So much to get through. Karen, you're really right. We really have to navigate through an incredible field of confusion, self-doubt, self-pain, a debris field, which has been around for generations. But if we are aware of what we need to do, we can start. If we have a path forward and we understand the steps, we can get started. I think it takes great humility too, because I don't know, just my perception is that every 4 or 5 years I get to experience that more people think that they're always right about everything.
Well, yeah, and it's either, and so many of us want to also point to a guru if we feel we lack what is needed within ourselves to prove that we're right. So it's almost like there has to be this level of accepting people where they are.
Yes.
And know that no one person has all of the answers. And so you were going on a kind of stream with that though, with every 4 to 5 years you feel like everybody feels like they're right all of the time.
Well, yeah, particularly on Facebook, this is in some sense, let's look at it positively. This is people, human beings, our species, trying to convince ourselves that we understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. We want to make sense out of the disorder. We want to make rhyme and reason out of the chaos. We want to have some meaningful discussion about pain and wounding. We want to have hope, so we create hope. Right. We want to have a vision of the future, so we invent visions of the future. The only thing we need to be careful about is keeping our feet on the ground and staying real.
Yes, is that being grounded. And the rain just picked up, so I'm going to have to get the puppies inside. Oh my goodness.
Oh, Karen was around in the 60s, meditating with them. Well, Karen, you've been around a long time. And that was my era too. I understand it. Yes, at least we're going from drugs to food, so that's progress. Absolutely. Back in the 60s, drugs was a big thing, LSD and mescaline and anything to have an altered experience, anything to take us away from the reality of society that we saw. So, we were desperate for a new hope and a new vision, but, drugs simply led us, down a hole into deeper darkness. So it's not the answer. It's not the paradigm of a new life.
And so many people want to, use, I have clients that have experimented with ayahuasca and other types of more mind, I don't want to say mind altering because I think, I don't want to lose myself again. Some of these plant medicines can help us go deeper within, but I think, because I know I personally had a shamanic experience where all I used was the breath. All I used was sound. And I went into a deeper place, and I didn't need anything other than my focused attention, the activity of the diaphragm, breathing in and out, and my focus was on my heart. And it was a profound experience. I mean, it was life-changing, honestly. And when I've shared it with those of my friends who have done ayahuasca, it's kind of a similar, maybe it's not exactly the same, but, I'm only adding this to the mix because these drugs sometimes can take you in one of two directions. It's not always going to be that deeper sense of knowing that all of us want deep down inside. They
Yes,
want to know
yes,
themselves
yes,
on a deeper
yes.
level. And is there a way
Yeah.
to do that without
Well, I
without
think there
introducing
is.
something in?
I think there is. And, I don't pass judgment on anyone for anything unless what they do is without consent and forcing others into anything. Everything must be
Yeah.
voluntarily. Otherwise, I don't pass judgment. I might have different opinions, and certain things people do or choose. I may not do it for myself,
Hmm.
but I know people are where they are, and I personally think, in my opinion, um, there is a way to awaken our divine self, our higher mind. There's a way to experience the blueprint within ourself of the unified divine whole self, undivided. And while a medication or a drug or a natural plant might create this altered experience for the moment,
Hmm.
still, after that substance is detoxed, you're going to be back to exactly where you were, except with the memory of the experience and insights provided, but still, we must transform ourselves. An altered mind metaphysical experience is different than incarnation. Incarnation is substantive, where our behavior changes. The way we think, feel, perceive, and act is different. This
It
is
is. It is
incarnation.
a transcendent. That is, yeah. And I can't attest to having experienced that. I think that is kind of the goal, though, to be so fully embedded in that knowing and in that expression of the knowing
Right.
that it's transformative. And
I think so. And we find in life when we have awakenings, we realize things about ourselves. We realize we have a perception of how life should be, what the world should be. But how that perception, that experience may not be how we are. It's simply an experience. Because I know people that have these profound, transformative, metaphysical, transcendental, existential, spiritual, revelatory, transforming experiences, and next week they're depressed,
yeah, it
paralyzed,
doesn't take
and can't
two.
get out of bed. Seriously. Now, I'm not undermining the experience, but simply what it does is it tells us the potential of what we can be. But potential does not mean we are there. And I think in a most serious and sober way, we need to establish the road in steps substantively of how to get there. So when we are there, we are not just there in our imagination. We are there in our mind, in our spirit, in our emotional self, and biologically. It's a reality. And doing this, I believe, at least for a moment, we must go back. To go forward, we must go back. And we must repair the fractures of childhood. We must discharge the trauma of whether it was sexual abuse, abandonment, verbal abuse, words of invalidation from your parents, from your cousin, from your uncle, from your school teacher. All this has fractured the developmental stage. As an example, I'll give you an example. You're born into this world. Our primal directive first on a physical level is to cuddle with the mother, the
Right.
exterior womb. You must have body
Hmm.
contact. We know that if a child born does not have bodily contact, it can die.
Yeah, that touch is part of activating those sensory receptors
How
and
profound
creating
is
that
this?
mind pattern. Yeah, I know it is incredibly profound.
Yeah.
And it's something forgotten, again, back to where healing is today. And
Mm-hmm.
why is it that why is it that someone would choose not to cuddle if they had the chance to cuddle? And
Well,
I'm not
yeah.
just trying to simplify it like that, but that's part of the not wanting to connect again.
The next primal directive is to continue feeding, except now the umbilical cord is cut, so the new umbilicus is breast milk.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is the first 6 months to year of life. This is a primal directive. And this is disrupted in most of the human population, the lack of touch or the wrong type of touch, right? Or
Right.
the formulas which have become in vogue so greatly. So already our primal directive, the body is already learning instinctually what's wrong. It's being redirected. We get to 2 or 3 years of age, the next stage of growth on a primal level, it's very, very clear that this is when we start to have a sense of self. We start to trust ourselves because we explore. We touch things. We're all over the place. And we have to be protected. And this is the time where we are learning pre-language as well. The infant is learning by sounds and tones, in warmth or cold. Pre-language. A lot of our fractures in our psyche unconscious are pre-language. This is why only a certain amount of talk therapy can work, because some of the damage is pre-language. It's
So what
primal.
kind of therapies would address that pre-language deficit, that pre-language inability to?
Well, we can understand cognitively as an adult, but we may not, words may not be the doorway into the pre-language damage. This is why relationships are so important, because relationships is the look in the eye, the tone of the voice. Whether that person is actually really paying attention to you or not, you feel it. And this feeling is wired to the heart chakra, and the heart chakra is wired to the unconscious pre-language stage of development.
Wow.
So we can do two things. We can compound the damage, or we can help heal it. When people are abusive verbally or have these nasty, twisted looks on their face in a relationship, when this goes on too much, it's compounding the wound of the pre-language, primal, developmental stage of our life.
Mm.
And you know what? This wound can go on your entire life. This is why people jump from one relationship to the next, never fulfilled. Never, never, never fulfilled. It's because it's not about the relationship. It's about the communication in the relationship. The same with sexual relationships. Intimacy is not just physical. Within every act of intimacy, whether it's a kiss on the cheek from a friend or a pat on the back or being held or deeper, it all has a code. It's communicating something to our nervous system and something to our unconscious self. You can tell when a person hugs you, but not really.
Right.
They're doing it politely. That's already telling you deep down in your soul, this is fake. I'm not really accepted. I can't be vulnerable. I can't let go. Why are you feeling that? Because that's what the person's communicating to you with a fake hug.
Wow. And it's so much that's unsaid that, I mean, so much, and that, like you said earlier, about health that cannot even be articulated.
Really, somebody's writing about NLP and kinesiology. I agree that these are excellent methods of being able to NLP, reprogramming, and kinesiology. Touch is very profound, actually, in how we touch. So, this brings us back to the fragmented healing system. If you're just going to fast or endless colonics, I hear people talking about colonics, you got to do them every day. Some people even, I read a post now where somebody said, well, we should start doing them hanging upside down to really get the water in there, And I'm like, I think you people need to slow down, And we need to get back to integration. And The key which is missing in my view, in reflection looking back, is we're born into the world. Our primal instinct, yes, is to have breast milk. Mm-hmm. That's physical. And then to get baby food, which should be nutritive, organic, green, plant-based. That's biological. But there's something else going on at the same time in your life, and that is you're wedged in the environment of the emotions of the caretakers, be it parents, whoever. So your soul is developing simultaneously in synchronicity with your biology. And this goes through 7 exact stages of emotional growth and our biological maturity governed by DNA. It is sequenced to develop in stages together, not separate. It's not like, well, let me grow emotionally and I'll take care of my body 20 years later, right? Or let me take care of my body and I'll take care of my emotions when I'm 21. That is called desynchronization.
Right.
And that's exactly what has happened to all of humanity. The body grows from a toxic diet, toxic environment. Already it's off the path. And our emotions are being fractured from not being nurtured correctly. So the levels of spiritual, emotional, and biological are never really connecting harmoniously, all the way up to adulthood. And then we wonder why by the time we're 25, people start having nervous breakdowns and globally are on Prozac.
And I know you've had you've shared with me the charts. You have a chart that kind of shows that mirrored sequence that people go through, the physical and the emotional. So you're saying that, our bodies go through a physical progression much more quickly, and we're not ready for the emotional. Or
Right.
we've not dealt with the emotional, or it's been fractured somewhere along the line, and then is that kind of where what you're
Yes, exactly. We simply need to start over, and we need to rebuild, to be reborn. If to have a rebirth is not Band-Aid therapy. It's not partial, fix the finger or fix the ear or fix your elbow. The whole self, emotionally, spiritually, and biologically, needs to be rebirthed. To rebirth implies that we have to come to a point of non-existence. How can you be born if you already exist?
That's a good point.
So what this means is that we have to literally shed everything within us, emotionally and biologically, which is not part of our true identity. Then for a minute, we disappear in existence, and then we reconstruct ourselves.
And how is it that we do that?
Well,
How do we disassemble ourselves completely?
Well, it goes through steps. The first process, emotionally and spiritually, is very simple. We simply need to tell the truth to ourselves about ourselves. Never mind what someone else says. Never mind the book you read or the guru. This is all good. I learn from other people, and unfortunately, I'm still buying books. I already have 500. I got to start throwing them away.
Yeah.
It's good to listen from others, but finally, we need to be still. Just stop. Acceleration does not get us there faster. We need to deaccelerate and stop. And we need to listen to the lessons our life has taught us. We need to do a survey of ourselves and be totally vulnerable to ourselves, about ourselves, and be safe. Only when we do this, do we realize that we are not in our true identity. It's in vogue today in the new age, cultural thinking. You are perfect the way that you are. Okay, I understand the meaning of this is that we want to accept ourselves because we're tired of being judged and shamed. I get it. But you may not be okay the way you are.
That honesty aspect needs to kind of be
Right.
also part of it. We have to look truthfully at where we are and make note of that which is not working.
Exactly. So the thing that I advise people in what I share and what will be in my forthcoming book, Wounded and Broken to a Rebirth Life. If anyone's interested is listening, I do have a group, Wounded to a Rebirth Life, on Facebook, which I talk about these things. The first step is to retrace our life. You go back as far as you can remember, and you write down all the disempowering moments, all the moments in which you were hurt, you felt uncomfortable, your conscience was crushed, your heart contracted, you felt inadequate, and you didn't know who or where you were or where you belonged. And you write down that list as far back as you can go. When you do this work, it's painful. But only then does it surface to your cognitive awareness. Because we are constantly running away from it. But it's staying right with you in your back pocket. And one day it's going to bite your butt. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We must survey our life. And then once we have the sum of our life and the wounds, we have to turn and look it right in the eye. And we must say to it, I will love you so deeply that the wounds will be dissolved. Now, we can't do that right away because the wounds are overwhelming. The wounds, in fact, is what has disempowered us. So we have to have another exercise. You go back through your whole life and you write down next to that chart when you were empowered, when you were loved, when you were affirmed. When did you feel whole and more complete? When did you have a sense of self? You take the column of your sense of self and when you were empowered, and you put that all together to be your higher mind parent. That higher mind parent will now work with the list of all the wounds and brokenness, which is the broken child, the little girl, the little boy in you. It's the first step. Because unless you have the higher divine self, unless you have the elder brother, sister, or parent mind, you won't be able to cope with the surfacing of all the wounds. It will be re-traumatizing.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to people when their wounds wake up or they're reminded, oh hell, I just remembered my uncle abused me. It can be very, very oh my God, I just remembered when I was raped or touched wrong, or in school when the teacher embarrassed me so much I wanted to die. When these things wake up, it can be overwhelming. So you need to have this higher strength or a friend to help you get through it, or it re-traumatizes you. But the danger of not doing this work is the trauma is still there. Just because you think you don't remember doesn't mean it's not there. It is there. If it wasn't there, then how do we account for the chaos in the world? How do we account for 30,000 suicides a year in America? How do we account for all the prescription SSRIs starting at 7 years of age? How do we account for the fact that in America, every 18 minutes, a person commits suicide? Every 90 seconds to 2 to 4 minutes, a woman is raped. We're not okay.
No, we're not.
So,
and the suffering that we experience each on an individual level is part of that not being okay in our society.
Yeah. Well, that's why we fake it. And we think we're going to make it by faking it. But if you fake it long enough, eventually, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline to be a fake. Eventually, that mask will crack.
Oh, it does crack, and it's painful. It's painful to watch. It's painful to experience.
Well, when that mask cracks and the floodgate is opened of the trauma, usually the person whom that individual is close to takes the brunt of the wounding.
That is true.
Yeah.
And
this is not okay. But this shows you, this is why we have it in psychology, we know that people snap. That's because they've
Yeah.
held it under wraps. They've held their trauma in a straitjacket all their life until eventually it breaks loose.
And don't you see this as part of the problem, where it kind of comes back to the fact that we are scared little children, and
Right.
you experience that. I mean, if you are the person that is taking all of the kind of verbal anger from the person that has cracked,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be easy to see how it's hard to kind of trust anybody again. Hard to,
Really,
yeah.
I know it's a big question. Just who do you trust? And you know what? We don't know.
Yeah, you just gotta try, I guess. You have to
You have to try
let.
and try again, and you might be betrayed again, you might be hurt again, but what's the point of living unless we try?
That's true.
You know, we
There's
have
no
to.
growth in safety.
It's true. We can stay in our bubble, but all bubbles eventually pop. I mean, we know that from taking bubble baths when we were kids. There's the proof right there.
Yeah,
Do you remember bubble baths?
I still take bubble
I say,
baths.
okay. So the bubbles pop. They all eventually do. It's the same with the big bubble gum. I know when I was a kid, we could, for 1 penny, we could buy bazooka bubble gum. And
Hmm.
you to blow it up real big and it would pop on your face. So,
Yeah, those bubbles do crack. They do pop open, and we just kind of, I guess that's what this Earth School is all about, really.
and we've reached a point, I think, culturally in society where the bubble is popping. Now, the mask is cracking. And that's why we have a lot of psychotic episodes. America has the most school shootings out of any nation of the world. Since the year 2000, we've had over 75 to 100 school shootings. This is crazy. People are psychotic. They're having psychotic breaks. But nobody breaks at the moment. It means there's been fuel that's been feeding the psychotic potential break for a long time. And it just simply has not been worked with. It's being ignored. It's being excused or afraid to look at it. You have genocides. When genocides take place, genocides are a result of mass psychosis.
Yeah.
And, I visited Auschwitz. I was there in Poland. It's horrific. The remains. I saw the gas chambers and the ovens. I saw where these people were shot and killed. I saw the baggage and the prosthetics of the kids that were later put in the ovens. I saw all this. Well, some people say, well, we shouldn't talk about bad things like that. Well, of course. But the thing is we say never again, but there's been at least 4 genocides since 1942. Look what happened in Rwanda, 1994. 1.2 million people. What happened in Cambodia, 1975, I believe it was, with the killing fields, 4 million people. In Bosnia, hundreds of thousands killed. In the Congo.
Yeah.
Now, there's beauty in the world, too. There's magnificent people, great people in the world, no doubt about it. But to me, look, at least this is my view. Every day, 30,000 children starve to death in the world. So I don't want anybody telling me, take a vacation, don't worry about it. 30,000 mothers and fathers are watching their children die a day. How can we accept this as being morally correct or acceptable? It isn't.
It's almost, it's people are incapable of processing that.
Yeah.
And especially, in first world nations like the United States, it's easy to be dismissive of this type of pain that goes on every day.
Yeah, and I understand, and I really appreciate people say, look, I got my own problems. I can't even pay my rent, and I'm facing a divorce. My son is sick, or I'm sick. I understand. I totally get it. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I just can't take anything more in right now at this moment. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't continue. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. And we need strategy. You know, you can try to get your car out of the ditch and keep spinning the wheel in the mud, and you'll keep doing it for, 20 years until you wear out the rubber on the tire. Or maybe you can figure out a strategy to get the car out of the ditch where we use half the effort. We need strategy now. We really do. And the one reason I'm so excited, actually, and I've been plugging away here for 45 years. I had some people tell me, why don't you just retire and sit in a rocking chair? And I'm like, what?
That's not who you
what?
are.
Yeah, I mean, that's not going to happen. 80 billion animals slaughtered a year.
Yeah.
As people post, if humans were dying at that rate, we'd be extinct in 17 days.
Wow, I didn't think of it that way.
That's how the math works out. Yeah, 17 days, the whole Homo sapiens, our species, would be extinct in 17 days at that pace. But I'm hopeful because we're having this conversation. If you and I can have this conversation, a million more people can, like the people who are listening right now. Like, let's have a look. We got Garrett, and we got Lewis, we got Karen, and a few other people. Even my physical brother Brian came on.
Oh, wow.
How about that? So my thinking is, if we can do this, others can too. The potential is there. We need to give birth to this potential. We need to have this dialogue.
Who knows? I'm finally catching up though on some of the posts that people have made. I haven't been able to keep my eye on that. It's hard doing this on my phone because usually on my laptop I can see everybody's posts as they come in, but on my phone it's a little bit different the way it's all set up. So so Garrett has been making a lot of comments. Luis, I believe, Pedro. Funny thing, when you study the history of anarchism and always find anarchism tied to veganism, you don't see that with other political movements. So anarchy is kind of more than that. And so and Garrett, I've seen your comments too about, Garrett's made a lot of comments. I think that with society and with all of these issues that you're bringing up, David, I think that us looking at a way to solve that is something that we all can be a part of once we get back to the nature of things, natural law, and discerning what's right and what's wrong. And that can help us kind of determine which, just mechanically how to move forward on this planet, but also coming back to the trauma, I think, is something that we do have to kind of prioritize. And that's why I wanted to bring you on today, because that is such it's so foundational. It's how we can't move forward unless that trauma is addressed. And
Agreed.
And each of us has a personal responsibility. With me trying to explain why I think this is so important, it's because I can see how devastating it is. Not just for personal relationships, but it's devastating for all of life on this planet when we have not looked at our own trauma and where we are not trying to fix that which went wrong. And there are pathologies out there where people cannot do that, unfortunately, where they're so ingrained that they're incapable of doing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Unless we, coming back to the first theme, tell the truth to ourselves about ourselves, we will continue to live in denial, cognitive dissonance, and we will fabricate a story about ourselves, which isn't even true. People do that a lot. They have these plastic personalities where they've invented a personality to convince themselves and everyone around them how good they are. Okay,
Yeah, that it is a story that they tell themselves
that's right.
because there's a pain underneath that story that's not being looked at.
Exactly. And I'm not saying, look, maybe the person is great, loving, wonderful, and serving. Wonderful. I acknowledge that. But I also know that there are people, it is very clear in development, when we have a loss of self-value, we synthetically create it by pretending we have value. And here comes the narcissist. And the narcissist is just the beginning of it. There are different levels of narcissism. You know, self-love can become very selfish.
Mhm.
So we need to understand the bridge between self and others, I and we and all of us. So it's very important that we do learn to let go. It's okay to be insecure. It's okay not to know. It's all right to be uncertain. It's okay to
Right.
acknowledge I'm not all that I crank myself up to be. And
True.
we need to feel safe with that because that is the beginning of rebuilding and repairing. And as long as the
And it's
masquerade goes on, we're going to, in the next 20 or 30 years, we're going to be in for some very tough times.
well, this brings us back to what you were saying earlier about the kind of disintegration that needs to take place. You know, like this is when we do the breakdown,
Hmm.
and from that complete disassembly of who we are, we've shattered ourselves into the smallest pieces, and we can see where all of the little scratches and bumps and everything that is disarray. From that, we can rebuild something much better.
Yes. It's the same as you go into a house, you know, if you have to change the wallpaper, you have to scrub down the walls and, you know, you don't paint over a wall without first removing the dirt and the grime and the chips.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't rebuild ourselves by leaving what is damaged there. So there's the law of nature, and that is cleansing and rebuilding. It's reciprocal. We detox, we remove the old, but we must regenerate and build the new. It's reciprocal, like inhale and exhale.
Mm-hmm. And it's natural law on a physical level. I'm part of, other groups that I like to gain knowledge from. For instance, I listen to Mark Passio's What on Earth is Happening podcast every Sunday, and he puts forth natural law as far as how we live in society. What are the true laws of nature, not man's law, not government, because government can change.
In increments, usually of 2,000 years, 400 years, 100 years, and 20 years, different cycles. Major cycles where we have a lot of potential to shift things is usually in 2,100 year periods of time. And I've traced this 40,000 years worth. We have lesser cycles of less intensity at 400-year markers, 100-year markers, and 20-year markers. But the interesting thing is that just like in our own personal cycles, stuff surfaces, right? And we have to face it. If we freeze, it takes us over. If we don't answer what surfaces in us, it's bound to repeat itself 5, 7, 10 years later. It's like having another relationship with a different person, but the same aspects
Yeah,
again.
same dynamics, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
History is that way. So I've watched these cycles with redundancy repeat themselves at least 10 times now on the major scale of 2,100 years. And we're at a point now in history where a lot of things are surfacing, you know, in the language of the karma. It's all coming back. It's not a punishment. I don't believe karma is a punishment. It simply is a mirror reflecting to us that we
Yeah,
now have a choice.
that's
A
a good
choice
point.
point. Yeah, sometimes we get into the shame game, you know, oh, this is happening because, you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
your punishment, but that doesn't help. So we're at a point now, I think, Patty, in history where everything is surfacing at once
Interesting.
because we are at a 40,000 year marker where, as a species, if we don't do the deeper work, I think, as one commentator was saying, get deep. If we don't do
Hmm.
this deeper work, we will implode or explode as a species. Homo sapiens is an oxymoron because the word means human wise. We have not been wise. We need to get to the point of being Homo divinis natus, which means human divine birthing.
And it's that it comes back to what you were saying about that incarnation.
Yes, exactly. We have to get out of the mind, into the body. We need to get our heads out of the clouds, keep them in the sky, but with roots in the ground. Like a tree grows, its roots sink deep, and
Hmm.
the roots are unseen. And if the roots which are unseen are not healthy, the tree will die. If what is unseen in ourself is not healthy, it will continue to be the saboteur of everything seen about us, like a tree. And as a tree, when you see a tree that's cut down, you see the rings
Right.
that trace its life. Well, we need to see the rings in our own life to understand what we've come from. And don't worry, none of us are going to be better by tomorrow morning.
Well, that was my hope that we'd all be
I
better by
know.
tomorrow
Yeah.
morning.
I was hoping to wake up and things would be just, like a walk in a
Yeah.
rose garden.
It's like we
But
just wake up tomorrow and we had this discussion. Well, look, that made everything better.
but the discussion actually sets a direction.
It does, yes.
And when we change the direction, the problem with the Titanic was the rudder was too small, the ship was too big, and it was going too fast. We need to slow down and change our trajectory a little bit. Then we will miss the iceberg, which represents our hidden trauma. The iceberg that we see on the surface is little compared to what's underneath the ocean. So I think, in summary, looking back over my life and the people I've worked with in the last 40 years, looking at history, everybody's in pain to one degree or another. Everybody is not telling the truth to one degree or another. Everybody is trying to tell the truth to
Yeah.
one degree or another. Everybody's pretending to some degree, and everyone's trying to be real to some degree. Being good is not enough. We need to heal deeply. And no matter how much we talk, it's all futile unless we take steps in deeper healing. We
David, I
have to
love
learn.
this. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, I want you to finish. I'm
Finally, in the end, it's not this or that or the other. The only thing that's going to truly heal us is when we learn to live from the realm of true heart. What we were lacking as a child wasn't truth or using Vitamix to blend our greens.
yeah.
What we missed was being loved, adored, and internalizing that I am good, true, and my right to life, my right to love, my right to express myself, my right to be is guaranteed.
Yeah.
This
That is,
didn't happen. So now we live with uncertainty. We question our mind. We doubt our life. And we doubt everybody we meet.
yeah, that is kind of at the heart of it.
We just simply need to learn to love ourselves through healing and to love others from true heart. To me, everything else is secondary. There might be tools to get there, but in the end, we must get to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the beginning? It's to love, because love gives life. When we are loved, or we love ourselves, we feel alive. And when we're not loved, we're not sure what life means anymore sometimes.
Yeah.
But we
It
can't wait
can
for,
be confusing, yeah.
we can't wait for someone to come love us, because we don't know when or if that will happen. So we have to connect to some deeper realm of love that exists on earth and the universe on earth. We can interact with a spiritual love of assurance, which can speak to us. And if we find somebody, even as a true friend, we're lucky. But until that time, each one of us must continue to be honest and tell the truth to ourselves, not live a life of pretense, not escape, not enter into the realm of cognitive dissonance about ourselves. And we must forgive. We must forgive and let go. Because without forgiveness, there is no beginning.
I think
And we
that
start again. We start again once we do forgive. That's it. Forgiving doesn't mean that we say what happened was okay. What we are saying is that I no longer allow it to be the dictator of my life.
that is true forgiveness, yes.
Yeah. I
And I
can
think
now
that
move
that
on.
needs to happen. Yeah, and that then this is kind of like the foundational work to healing. I think that I'm glad we're discussing because not being a psychologist, I can't really tell my client, that your pain in your right shoulder is going to be because you're not forgiving somebody. But I think if we were to go deeper into what that pain represents, it could really have that connection. And I'm not saying all physical pain is due to a lack of forgiveness, but I think that there is a lot of truth in what we're saying here. And no matter what a person's physical state of health is, we can all look at that.
I think so. I think so. So I've truly enjoyed sharing with you and understanding the wholeness of self, the beauty which could be in life, the culture we can create of true heart, true love, and true body.
Yes.
We need to understand true life, broken life, and whole life. And we can move forward. Within us is the unborn potential of limitless possibility,
Mm-hmm.
and only we can give birth to it. We must rebirth ourselves into our second life and learn from the first life where our boundaries are. But don't worry, we'll be hurt again. And if we are, we will live with empathy even at a deeper level. And this is the way of compassion, I think.
It is. That duality is needed to see that you have to see the darkness to appreciate the light.
Yeah. So I honor you, and I'm grateful that you invited me to be on. I know I spoke a lot, but I
That's
haven't
fine
really.
because this is what needed to be said tonight. I
Oh,
think
thank
that
you.
we got that across,
Yeah.
and this is a nice springboard, I think, for future discussions of what healing is. And I know that a lot of the who joined this Facebook group, like Joseph, Joseph says thank you to you, and I thank you too, David.
You're
Um,
welcome.
as a
If I
detoxification, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, if anybody's interested, I do have a Facebook group called Wounded to a Rebirth Life, which I post 3 times a week, just tidbits of guidance. But I don't know, maybe next time, Patty, we can allow for people to ask questions for themselves.
Yeah,
that
I
we can
think that's
respond to
great.
help provide some steering, some direction. It's
And I
up to
think
you.
for you and I, David, or me and anybody who I bring onto my my live Q&As, I would like to have a better platform. This Facebook sharing is not working very well, I don't think.
Yeah, I know you mentioned Skype. That might be a good idea.
Yeah,
Skype is
I was
pretty stable.
interviewed by Dawn from Dawn's Earthly Botanicals a couple of weeks, or about a couple months ago at this point, and she had a shared screen, so I might contact her to find out how she did that. Um,
Yeah, it's in the settings on Skype, and it actually says share screen.
yeah, for
Um,
Skype it's easy, but just how to go live and to do that as a live
oh,
broadcast,
oh, I see.
that's
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
curious
yeah.
about.
I'm not a techno genius, that's for sure.
Mm.
And I'm like you, I poke around and see what happens.
Yeah, that's how I do it too.
And that was cute when the glasses and mustache came on you. I thought that was fun.
That was me just pushing buttons and trying to figure out how to get things back to
Yeah,
where they were, and it didn't
yeah.
turn out the way I expected.
Well,
But
thank
that's
you.
how life is, right? But yes, thank
Yeah,
you, David. I know your battery is getting low, and thank
yeah,
you, Karen, Joseph, Garrett. I think Luis was here earlier. For all of you that joined the live call and the discussion, thank you all so much. And thank you for putting up with our experimentation tonight. But thank you first and foremost, David, for your many years of wisdom and your depth. I really, truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
you're very welcome. Please take care. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye,
All right.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.